Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here to join us today. I wanted to say a few words about our research committee because maybe many of you may not be familiar with it. First, I would like to introduce Pat Sikora, who is really our our leader in this. She corrals us all and keeps us on track, and she will be also monitoring the Q&A today for the discussion at the end of the presentation. So we developed a research committee as part of the organization because we recognize the importance of having a substantial body of evidence to reach one of our major goals, which is to support SE as a preeminent modality for addressing trauma. So we've been operational for the last 18 months. We're an international committee. We have a number of sub-working groups and activities. We're writing a white paper on SE as seen through the lens of body psychotherapy. We have created for the first time the Peter Levine Research Awards. One is for established researchers and the other is for new researchers. We have picked our two winners for this year, and we will be having a ceremony for them at our International Virtual Conference, October 22nd and 24th. So please put those dates on your calendar. The conference is going to be amazing, and we will have a number of sessions that are research focused, including a roundtable on demystifying the research process for those of you who are maybe new to this and want to know more about how we actually undertake this kind of research. We've also created a listserv to create greater connection and dialogue in our community, and Rebecca will put that in the chat. And we're also working on a specific section dedicated to research and all of our activities on the SE website. So this webinar is one in a series of which we are really moving towards having a monthly focus on research and to highlight what people in the community are doing. So I want to say there's lots of research going on in SE, but thinking about it from the 10,000 foot level, having consistency in our protocol is really key to being able to compare results. And when you think about how a modality becomes an evidence-based modality, we need randomized controlled trials, but also having systematic reviews is another way that can bolster the body of evidence. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, a systematic review is really looking at all the data on a meta level and comparing the results of different studies. So having a consistent protocol that we're all using can really go a long way in that direction. And so to that point, we are very lucky to have with us today from Denmark, Frank Olsen and Kripa Lene Henriksen, who will speak to this issue. And the title of our webinar today is, Can we create a manual for somatic experiencing modality for research purposes? And also just to mention that if this webinar inspires you, please think about donating to our committee because we are doing fundraising for research, and Rebecca will put that link in the chat as well. So I'm pleased to introduce to you now our panelist. Frank Olsen is a Danish psychologist from Copenhagen University, where he started in 1989. He specializes in psychotraumatology and is supervisor for the Danish Psychologist Association since 2004. He's an organizer for somatic experiencing practitioner trainings in Denmark. He's been assisting for years, and he's been a senior assistant since 2012. So as he's chairman of the Danish and European Research Committees and a member of the SEI Research Committee, and he's also part of a leader team for pilot research in the effectiveness of SE for treating trauma. And at the moment, he's co-writing a chapter on somatic experiencing as a treatment modality for PTSD in the book Psychotherapeutic Modalities for Treating PTSD. I'm sorry, that's not current. That was published in 2019. So there's a chapter on that already out there for publication, for which we're grateful. Next, I'd like to introduce Kripa Lene Henriksen. She's been an SEP since 2003. She's licensed in acupuncture and a registered complementary therapist in psychotherapy, acupuncture, and massage. She assists trainings on all levels and is assisted also with Diane Poole Heller's DARE program, as well as other SE workshops and masterclasses. Kripa has been a member of the Research Committee of EASE since 2011. And for those of you who don't know, Europe is way farther along in the research process than the US. So we're really wanting to learn a lot from them about how to do this. She's also a member of the research committee on the Danish SE Association between 2010 and 2018, where a protocol and a manual for research in SE was developed. Kripa has been part of the Center for Integrative Medicine in Denmark. She's done a significant body of work with refugees and has taught acupuncture, massage, oriental dance, body awareness, mindfulness, and self-development. She's been a practicing meditation and inner work for more than 40 years and is a resident at the spiritual community of, forgive me if I do not pronounce this correctly, Vexenteret, Vexenteret, and is a member of their professional forum. So please welcome me and join me in welcoming Frank and Kripa. And I will now turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
What a nice introduction, actually. Thanks, Michelle. Yes, my name is Frank, and we are having a heat wave here in Denmark, actually quite unusual. So I'm sitting here sweating. And thanks for joining for this very exciting topic that has occupied Kripa and me and the rest of the research committees in Europe and Denmark for quite many years. So, and yeah, I could say that we started the research committee in Denmark in 2007, and I joined in when the old chairman left in 2010, and I've been there ever since. And in East, we had also the research committee when we founded the East organization or association in 2010. And I just popped in for research committee because we needed such one. So I just stepped in there. And in the beginning, I was pretty much alone, but Kripa, thanks God, joined in the European research committee. So we worked together there ever since, and you stepped out of the Danish research committee, and you are now only active in the European research committee. And actually, we headed out in 2011 discussing how to do research in SE, and we came upon that major obstacle. How are we going to make a protocol on manual for somatic experiencing modality? Because you're lacking some of the, because it's so process-like. So how do you capture the process and still do evidence-based research in that? And we asked Peter that question, and he said, well, you could, as a starting point, start with the 9 building blocks from in an unspoken voice. And Kripa is going to tell you a lot more about that. We also get that assignment from the GA in 2010 to go through the research already done and present it at our next GA. So what you see today is actually practically a recycling of that show, because this found the basis of our findings and our way of working with this topic of manualizing SE therapy. So I can show you just a minute. Our commissarium in the 2 research committees that is widely overlapping, thanks God, with the commissarium we have in the International Research Committee, that is to encourage research mindedness among SEPs and to provide support and guidance for research. And to develop an evidence base for SE through promoting research into clinical effectiveness of SE and develop a research database, search facilities, information services. And finally, to develop innovative research models, both quantitative and qualitative, which reflect better the interactive and dynamic elements of SE and the patient-centered nature of the therapeutic relationship. So we really hooked ourselves on quite some issues here. And to develop and audit and outcome protocols that access the range of SE practice in Europe and the success of SE treatment in clinical practice. So, and this is widely overlapping with International Research Committee on the Somatic Experiencing Institute. So thanks for inviting us for this. And I'm going to run through very, very quickly some of those studies that is already made. And I apologize for not having enough time actually for this, because every one of these studies, there's a huge amount of work going into this. And every one of them deserves at least 1 hour going through, but I'm going to try to make it in 5 minutes each. So stay with me and have patience. So what we found at that time was 3 field studies, short-term early intervention with follow-up, one done by Laura Leach and Rajesh Selva, and one done by Laura Leach again in 2005. And 2 group studies, partly with follow-up, SE in a prison therapeutic community 2010, and the group treatment, this is quite new actually, group treatment of refugee women in Turkey. And this caught actually both Kripa and mine interest, because we used to work a lot with traumatized refugees. So this is a really interesting study. But the main purpose of these studies is actually to highlight how they made their protocol or their manual, because this is today's topic. So, and of course, we included Dina Ross's and her crew's SET studies, because this is the first SET studies actually done on SE. So this is quite interesting. So we're going to run through the protocols from those 2 studies as well, and the latter one, but I'll get back to that. So let's start running through. Somatic. This is done by Laura Leach. And actually, this is in the early days of Foundation for Human Enrichment, and following quite nicely Peter Levin's vision for somatic experiencing. Actually, you go out there and help people with these SE tools. And Laura Leach did that, and she did some research on the way too. So this is a kind of pioneer study, and from the pioneering days of Foundation for Human Enrichment. And she included 53 adults and children assessed by intake and closure, and a follow-up 1 year later. And 1 to 2 sessions in 1 month after the tsunami, done by protocol and with SEPs. And this was done with tsunami survivors in Thailand back in 2005. And she used this protocol, tracking shifts in the nervous system by following survivors' report of internal sensations, and by observing grounding, and by observing, and she used grounding techniques and resource use internally and externally, and pendulation and hydration. And you really recognizes old familiar somatic experiencing concepts here and way of working with it. So, and she used actually some data collection instruments, symptom tracking from 3 main symptoms, and she she drew on the SCPs participating in this study. So they collected the main symptoms from the participants, and that could then see if there was any change in that. And she also put that on the SCPs, that they should kind of make a qualitative study as well. So let's see how her results was about that. And she had actually pretty good results, as you can see. They had reported symptoms, a decline in the symptoms, 67% immediate, and 3 to 5 days follow-up, 90%, and 1 year after. Still a decrease in the reported symptoms. And what was observed from the SCPs who participated and made follow-up studies here, they could also see a decline in the symptoms of 95%, 84%, and 96%. So this is a really nice study, actually, proving some effect of what do you call it? The SE modified, she calls it a modified SE model, because she's using the protocol and especially the grounding exercises. And it was really only 1 to 2 sessions, building mainly on training people's procedural and its reception. So This is what you find in all the studies. Actually, they're building on feeling the felt sense, because that forms also the pretty much the basic of somatic experiencing. So the next one is done by Raja Selvam in India after the tsunami as well. And this is a non-controlled field study. And he also used somatically based therapy with tsunami victims, 150 patients. They were assessed four times before treatment, immediately and after treatment, 4 weeks later, and then 8 months after treatment. And they received 1.25 of an hour somatically based modified SE treatment, but done by protocol. And it has a very nice design in this, because if you see the protocol, the 4 stages: containment involves increasing awareness of bodily arousal reactions, feelings of being grounded and connected with the therapist, and safe. And you'll see that again and again. This initial safety, a sense of safety going in all the protocols actually. So that's something to look out for as well. The narratives was built, and actually before he did this, he made a very short introduction for somatic experiencing approach, and a very short introduction for what this is good for. Actually, that could be comprehended from Southern Indian fishermen. And the interventions he did was actually mainly releasing the joints and the ligaments and the tendons by holding it. So the participating SPs were instructed in how to do that intervention. And he told people that, well, if you have a lot of energy in your body, you have to drain it out in some way, and the arms and the legs are your tubes through which you can actually decrease the energy and the tensions in your body. And that worked really nice. As the SCPs were working, they actually carried people through, and this is very much Raja Selvam style, to educate as you go. So you keep orienting the client of what is happening in the body, and that's actually enhance the possibility for the client to recognize different physiological states as they are coming and going. And this really helps the orienting, so you're not just lost in your arousal symptoms. And then, of course, tracking the bodily experience through interoceptions, and of course, helping participants to discharge and have a better self-regulation of the body experiences and states. He also used some data collection instruments, as you can see here. Here I used a modified post-tsunami symptom checklist taken from the impact of event scale. So he modified that a bit to attend to the special situation with tsunami survivors. And again, he was very actively engaging the client in their own healing process and setting the goals for what they wanted relief from. And this is his findings actually. 5.6% work worse, but the same, but very good results actually, and 8 months later. And there's something about this 8 months later, because they were having a hard time actually finding these people again after 8 months, because they lived in different places and have taken refuge in different parts of India. So, but he managed actually to do a follow-up study, and this is a results in improvement of post-traumatic or post-tsunami symptoms. And this is the overall findings. As you can see, nicely arranged in percentages. Pretty good. So the conclusion is that it's pretty reliable and significant, and that somatic experiencing therapy should be invested further in. So this is actually one of the degrees you can have in your research studies, that this is a promising method worthwhile studying further. Then Laura Reeds did a research study in preventing secondary traumatization and burnout among healthcare workers working on working in the in the after effects of let's see. Oh, this is her field study of yes. This is a study of the hurricane, following the hurricanes of Rita and Katerina. And she gathered the healthcare workers working there, and she taught them, gave them preliminary insight into somatic experiencing and what to expect actually. And she divided into a control group and one who actually received the somatic experiencing intervention for prevention of secondary traumatization. And she ran into the problem that those who were interested in going into the active treatment group, and they were all younger because they were less experienced by, and all the old ones, they actually preferred not to go into the study. So she had little difficulties around the demographic structure of her groups, which she created an artificial control group for that. So and she also used data collection instruments and measured actually resiliency. And she used ANOVA to create her artificial control group. She found significant differences between the two groups. Both groups decreased PTSD symptoms, and resiliency significantly was better in the treatment group and worse in the control group than at intake. Let's see, protocol. Tracking shifts in the CNS, pretty much the same, working through the proprioception and the interoception. Use resource internal and external and grounding techniques and pendulation and titration, or familiar somatic experiencing concepts, actually a way of working. This is a very interesting study done by Paul Marriott. He was working in a closed community, therapeutic community in a prison for men serving life sentences. And he actually did a tremendous work in making a protocol for this study. I really went into depth. So if you have a chance, please read it, because this is fine work. So we did one session per participant every 5 and 8 weeks, free and all. Measured it 3 and 7 days after each sessions. And his protocol: safety, creating safety and safe environment for the client, tracking sensations in the body, resource titration and pendulation, discharge, integration, organization, stabilization, and orientation. And of course, they were informed of the SE before signing up for the sessions. And he used some quite special questionnaires for his assessment designs. So they initially self-assessed themselves, pointing towards symptoms that they wanted to change or alter, or they have expectation to have a benefit from the somatic experiencing for. And he asked for the intensity of those different feelings, and pretty much the same post-session. And what's interesting is his finding as well, as you see here, because he actually, in the reported problems people were come up with, especially anxiety and anger management, you find actually somatic experiencing helping a lot. But there are some, you can see his findings here. But he also too says it needs further research, and hope for the UK Association for help on that. And there's something special around this because when you're doing this study in a therapeutic community, that's largely building on improving your social engagement skills. I mean, I know from Stephen Porges that this is a really good buffer against sympathetic arousal. So it's not in that way a clean study because you can't separate what's the benefit of the therapeutic community and what's the benefit of SE, but still, you may say these are the results, and that seems quite promising, actually. Now we have Generas and her crew at International Trauma Healing Institute and the Israel Center for Treatment of Psychotrauma. There were 60 persons involved, 3 active treatment and 30 in a control group of waiting list patients, no complex trauma or other psychiatric disease. 5 sessions done by protocol. So, and she too used a lot of data collection instruments. And as one of the first, she's actually using the Freiburg mindfulness inventory. And that makes a lot of sense because somatic experiencing pretty much focus on the here and now and what's happening in the body here and now. So you should actually expect to have some improvement in that specific parameter to measure on. And she made a protocol. Psychoeducation, homework assignment, list of resources, tracking shifts in PTSD symptoms between sessions. He asked actually participants to do some tracking of the PTSD symptoms in between the first 3 sessions so they could follow their own progress in that. And she encouraged them to have a list of resources and make that as a homework as well. And then from session 3 to 4, she gradually focused on the traumatic event and trauma stories. So this is actually a nice setup for somatic experiencing treatment in the run of 15 sessions. And this is session 5 to 11. The therapeutic work focused on using the traumatic story or parts of it to trigger low-level autonomic nervous system activation, track bodily reactions, and guide its discharge. So here we actually see the main focus actually in most somatic experiencing therapy working with trauma. It goes into this to report and to titrate and give people the time to experience discharges in between the activation spikes. And the last 3 sessions was used to stabilize and integrate and organize. So this is a really nice protocol. And she had some good results as well. So this study actually proves the benefits of somatic experiencing in an RCT study. It was one of the first ones. And then, of course, we have a Turkish assistant professor, Ansi Özcan. This is quite interesting because he is done in an NGO center with 22 refugee women, and they've received group treatment. He didn't go in so much into the trauma history, but it was more a kind of approach to give them some tools for releasing some of their symptoms. So he used impact of event scale revised because mindfulness attention awareness scale, multidimensional scale of perceived social support. That's because he had hypothesis in the start that somatic experiencing would largely improve social support, the use of social support, and their mindfulness skills. And so he did an outcome study, pre and post follow-up. Here's his protocol: 6 group sessions with 18 psychological activities built up nicely, as you see, warm-up, grounding, and then a session activity and ending with a positive feeling. And you recognize probably the pattern here to start with a resource and to have some activity in the middle, and then ending up with a resource just to wrap it up nicely. So the first session was again to inform about somatic experiencing and what to expect, and also to set rules. So you could call this initial relatively safety and security. And what's so nice about this protocol is it's built on CyBAM elements. So every session covers one element from CyBAM. So in the second session, he encouraged the participants to think of a stressful daily event and then track it in the body in the first session, sensations, and repeating that in the next session regarding affects. What kind of emotions did the normal stressful daily activity give rise to? And then images and thoughts, they were combined in one of the sessions. And to see what pops up in your mind actually, and what kind of tracks are there from your experiences, from your sensory experiences, and the behavior that gave rise to. And last session, of course, integrating the tools and set them there off. So he found that it's actually decreased their post-traumatic stress levels remarkably, and they were more effective in increasing mindfulness levels. Yeah, he worked with a control group as well, and it was sustained actually after 2 months. And his program, as he called Somatic Experiencing, SP stress program, it would be more effective in getting social support than those in the experimental group, and that was true too. So finally, we have our own study from Denmark, actually an RCT study done by Han Ellegaard and a crew on the University of Southern Denmark, and it's a spine center. And they have that additional SE intervention that would reduce pain-related disabilities compared to the treatment as usual alone. So they included 91 patients, 45 patients assigned to SE and 46 to treatment as usual. And all 91, they received the treatment as usual by the physiotherapist. And they use self-reported scales, which you have to do when you measure pain. Trauma questionnaire, part 4, for measuring the symptoms, PTSD symptoms, and the pain catastrophizing scale. And they had that hypothesis that SE would actually work for, especially this one, pain catastrophizing, and also for decreasing the trauma symptoms. And they didn't work by protocol. They worked with SEPs in a natural setting because they were assigned to SEPs in the area for 6 to 12 SE sessions. And of course, they received the treatment as usual by a physiotherapist. And this is what they found actually. Decrease in the PTSD symptoms remarkably compared to the control group. And also for kinesiophobia. And the rest of there was no difference in between the two groups, but this is remarkable. Actually, kinesiophobia comes from that you are afraid of moving because of the pain you experienced in the past. And they argue that, of course, somatic experiencing and the beneficiary, this promoting and training the interoception that actually would go in and decrease the symptoms, because you learn to stay with the body and body arousal and the pain in a more modified way without having these arousal spikes around it. So, and they didn't compare in the control group. Actually, they stayed having the same PTSD symptoms, but that's obvious because they were not treated for that. So you would expect to find that, and that's a weakness of this study. So they point that in that direction, that maybe you should include treatment for PTSD with another modality and compare it in that way. But they didn't find a connection in between pain and the somatic experiencing and the decreasing in the pain, because that was pretty much the same in the two groups. So here we have a summary of the protocols used. Establishing relative safety through grounding exercises, informations about SE. It's pretty obvious to have some kind of relative safety, and of course orientation, because the first victim in traumatization is always your orientation. So when you start treatment, of course you should give some kind of orientation of what to expect and why we're doing this. So that makes a lot of sense. And all protocols also use tracking in the body, resources, titration, penetration, discharge, all the familiar somatic experiencing tools actually, and orienting to the here and now. So what we can conclude, all research designs and data collection tools development meets the client system and culture in accordance with what is needed and what is possible, respectful and ethical. But it makes it really difficult to compare and repeat. So I'll give the final word to Gina Ross, who actually stresses this in her research study, that actually it's SET studies have a difficulty in catching the dynamic nature of the process in SE. And for that reason, it's actually hard to make a formalized protocol for that, because it's happening in the moment and you attend to the present state, and you and the symptoms you are presented for, and do what's needed in that area. We used some of her findings actually, because we had some peer supervision from her in regards to our research project, and it's very useful actually to translate SE tools into observable phenomena, so it can be observed from a third party. And that's what she actually also stresses here, that you can't ensure actually that the therapists and the SCPs are actually what they are doing actually in their sessions. You can just look at the outcome, because it's not easy to capture that. We're trying to make up for that in our research study by filming all the sessions, so you can verify that it's SE tools you're using in the therapy, and by that getting around this specific problem. And the final one, it makes it hard to compare it with other treatment modalities when we don't have a protocol. So we're trying to make up for that, and I hand it over to Kriba, because he's going to through our suggestion for a protocol. So I'll stop sharing just a minute, Kriba. Right?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Okay. So I will begin by telling a bit about, and thank you, Frank,
Yes,
and
welcome.
continue from where you stopped in a way, because in Denmark we were this research committee, and we were going to look into how can one make a manual or protocol that is true to the organismic way of working in SE, that it is a process. And very often when research is done, then it's told you do this in the first and this in the second and this in the third. And that would be in a way to do a violation to the process of SE, which is so individual a kind of process. So we have to take this seriously, and how can we do this? And then what we wanted, then what we did to try and come around this was to use two tools. One was to employ Scott Miller's fit outcomes. I'm not going to say much about that, because the other one was to create a manual or protocol suited for SE that could like take care of this individual process. And we consulted with Peter Levin in Zurich in 2011, actually. And he opened our eyes to the 9 building blocks of the book in an unspoken voice, which you probably know, all of you. And there are described the 9 building blocks of SE. So we wanted to find a way in which to do this, in which to qualify what was happening as SE, because that can be quite difficult in a way. So I will share my screen. Yeah, I'm sorry if you can't see all of the text. I don't know how to do this, but what we wanted, as I said, to make a manual where one could mark which interventions the therapist has been doing, and then we would make video footage of some of the sessions, and then somebody could look if we had done these things, if we had followed the manual. And as I said, we used the 9 building blocks from in an unspoken voice. And they are just here. I will just leave it a little bit on the screen so you can just have a quick look, because you all know this, of course, but this is a way of looking at it more systematically, in a way, which things are you going through actually in the process of therapy with SE. Yeah. And you can see there are many of the same interventions that Frank has talked about from the other studies. Here we just have it. We wanted to, in a way, put it into a manual. And the purpose of making a manual is, of course, to make sure to ensure that somatic experiencing, which is an approach, and many and the therapists sometimes use it in maybe a slightly different way and have other modalities. Some of them are psychologists, some of them are psychotherapists, some of them are physiotherapists. But then how to ensure that somatic experiencing is being applied. And then if you have a manual and you can mark what has been used, then maybe also it can be compared, you can compare studies with each other. And it's very important that a manual is honoring somatic experiencing as this approach and as this very individual process. Because what we were trying to do was, in fact, to get into evidence-based practice, or rather practice-based evidence, you can say, practice-based evidence, that this is what we are actually doing. What are we actually doing when we are doing SE? And we would like to create the manual so that a third party could recognize that in this session, somatic experiencing is being practiced in this session. And they could do that by watching a video of it, and then they could see and compare with what had been marked by the therapist as about what had been used. So we wanted to create this manual and how to do this. And what we did was we invited SCPs in Denmark, and 17 SCPs showed up. And then also the 3 of us, it was Ulrik Jørgensen and Frank and me, who were in the research. I had not mentioned Ulrik Jørgensen, but we were the 3 of us in the research committee. And so we made a World Cafe process and to describe in detail the 9 building blocks and what takes place actually in a World Cafe process. Maybe some of you know it. We had 9 tables out in the room, and then people would go from one table to the next, like stay at one table for a time, and then discuss and write down what were they actually in their own practice doing for each of the 9 steps. Like take one step, how am I using this step? That was like the way to, and you saw I showed the steps before, so they would go into each one of them. And we got a lot of material from that. We got so much material from that. And then the 3 of us sat down and worked for, I think, for more than a year going very thoroughly through each step and describing in detail what actually was taking place, what were we actually doing, and also making sure that somebody else would be able to understand it, maybe not even an SE therapist, but also like a third party could understand by looking at the session what is going on according to this manual. And then when we had developed it, we then translated it into English so that it could be used in other countries. Yeah. And you will see I'll give an example also, but the manual is structured in the way that there's a name of the building block, and then there's examples of how this step may be used, and then there's further description of examples of this. So we have like three levels in the manual. And I have an example here, which is the building block number 7. Because this is the shortest one. Some of the other ones, there are more material, but you can see the name of it is resolve arousal states by promoting discharge of the vast survival energy mobilized for life-preserving action. That's the building block number 7. And then we describe, you can see with like the fat types, you can see like the different examples, and then you can see further on explained how this could be viewed. So we thoroughly talk through each of the steps, like how is it possible to see that this step is being used. And the idea was then that then when the therapist has done the session, then they would mark which ones of the steps has been used in a particular session. Yeah. And according to Peter Levine in his book also, the therapist should start with the first 3 steps. And then in addition, block 8 and 9 should be used. And then of course, in a whole series of sessions, all of the blocks would be used. I think I should maybe go back so you can see the steps again, all of them, because then that would make more sense for you to see it. So I'm just going back. Just a minute. Oh, sorry. I don't know what is happening here. I don't know what. Yeah, here they are. So the first three steps, of course, like in the introduction of the session, is taking place, and all the 3 first ones should be there, and then also the 2 last ones. Of course, it's very nice that the person leaves your clinic in a regulated state, and also the orienting to the here and now after the sessions are important. And what we did then was to we worked together with Franz Fischer, who has made a website and a program where you can put in questionnaires and also things for the client to fill in and things for the practitioner to fill in. And he has put it up very nicely. Maybe Frank in a minute can show you. This is then in the Danish version, so that's why you need to see this first, but then you can see how it is. And in the protocol we made, we also had, of course, assessment of the client first through a questionnaire. Is this we wanted to work with people with PTSD, but also who, of course, yeah, also we had some exclusion criteria, but also like first we used the IESR, but then we found out to use the PCL5, and the person would fill that out, and then also we used the Scott Miller fit outcomes, and then the manual. and the therapist could then fill out which ones of the blocks in the manual had been used. So yeah, so and we went then through a process. The three of us are also filming some of our own sessions, and then scoring them with which ones of the blocks were used, and then letting also the others have a look at it and then discuss it. Because the whole idea was that a third party, if a third party saw the session, they would be able to see that this is SE happening. Because how is SE different from other modalities? So this was a way of showing what is this is SE. So how can we qualify that this is SE? So that was the whole idea. So yeah. I don't know if I have any more of this. Of course, I don't want to go too much into the rest of the protocol because then that would take a lot more time, and I'm not in the Danish research committee anymore, but the study is continuing, and Frank can maybe say something about that, but maybe he could first maybe show you from Exile how it is put in the So I will give the word to you, and I will stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
Okay, I start sharing mine.
Great.
So this is the way it's set up. Actually, you start with a short instruction, what you're supposed to do, and then you go on and you go out of the program because you can't get it. It has a kind of time. Here we have it. Test client. You can see the 9 building blocks here, and the rest of the measurement tools are nicely ordered in this program actually. So this is an instruction, and then you go on. Establishing relative safety, yes, no. And if you're in doubt, you can watch the details, and then you can see the outlines from the SEP's work actually. You do that through showing you're present and focused, and you can adjust the client's place in the room, and you can also focus on different times of clients' well-being, because frames and what kind of details goes into it, information about the methods, and of course validate the client and grounding the client and focus on resources. Much of this you also saw in the other research studies protocols, and you can look for further details here. Then you get a much more elaborate instruction in what goes into this. Again, built on the 17 SEP's job work. This is basically how this is built up.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that this has also been translated into English, and I could also show you a few more of the examples in English because I have also the manual. But it's just to say that, of course, this is also available in English. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I should show Scott Miller as well. I could do that because I think I have it open. Feedback informed. Basically, you measure improvements from time to time by object rating scale, where the client report any promotion or any things that are happening in the social sphere, in the family sphere, and his own personal well-being, and all over generally. And you measure on those ones, and that comes from Scott Miller because it basically finds that this is what people are struggling with. So why not measure on that? And so measure the improvements. And as you can see from the start point here, this client had a really, this is the baseline actually, and there was a huge improvement from the first to the second time, just to get these somatic experiencing tools, and actually to discover that discharge can happen actually, and you don't need to be in that high aroused state all the time. And then there's an expected, of course, decline in it because the honeymoon is over. So now you're starting to bring up your real problems, and then you're working on that, and you can see a steady improvement in the OIS as the sessions are moving along. So this is a way to measure the process actually from time to time. And you also ask the client to rate you as a therapist, and not as a therapist, because Scott Miller says this is not a popular contest. It's actually more about the relation, because it's in the non-specific factors and the interrelational that the healing lies actually. So you ask your client to rate you on the relation, and if your goals and aims, if that suits the client, and if they can use the method, and all in all how it has been. And this client is very nice to me because she actually scored me max. So something that I must have done something right here. So Scott Miller also says, make sure you have poor ratings here, because then you have a really honest client, and they get a better treatment actually. So remember to instruct your clients that honesty is the key word here, because the more honest they are, the better treatment they get, because it really is about tuning in the match between the therapist and the client. Yes, it's pretty much how we get around the problem of the process nature of SE happening in the moment from time to time. Yes, I think that's pretty much it. So looking forward to hear any comments around about this. And of course, we're going to attend to the Somatic Experiencing Conference in the United States in October. So hopefully having something more detailed findings to present at that time. And for sure, we're going to continue this discussion on how to manualize the somatic experiencing approach to healing trauma, because it's an ongoing issue. How are we going to do that? So looking forward to meet a lot of you at that conference and and carry this discussion on. So
this is Pat. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to get my video going here so I can rejoin the conversation. What an interesting conversation. And I'm just trying to get, okay. I may not be able to be seen, but if you can hear me, that's great. So are you ready to entertain questions? There have been a few that have been typed in.
Yes,
Maybe
please.
I would like to say one thing, which is, of course, I can show also examples. I have the manual in English, so if somebody wants to see another, other examples, but maybe it's not needed, but yeah.
Perhaps when we have the questions, we can.
Yeah. Yes, if it's needed. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. I'm just going to sort of skip through these, and I'm going to start with some of the initial questions that people had. There's a question regarding not just the protocol itself, but the qualification of the practitioner. A credentialed SCP who has completed the training, is that part of the protocol that is appropriate for these sorts of studies? Is there controlling for that kind of level of the therapist, I guess, is the key question. Is that a variable that's considered in your protocol?
That's a good question. Actually, Gina Rossi stresses that in particular because she's having supervision with the participating ACPs to make sure that they actually understand the protocol and also act accordingly. But of course, there's a lot of freedom in their own sessions. So, and as she says, that hard to report and hard to follow. But she stresses that they need supervision during the whole research project. And we have that too, actually. So as part of the setup to actually ensure the quality. I don't think we have any particular, they have to be, I think they should have their own practice actually to make this happen. That normally means that they have finished their SE training for a couple of years and working in their own private practice. So they are supposedly qualified to enter the project, but that's true. It could be a bias actually if you having therapists in the project that has poor skills. Then, of course, how to make up for that. But we're filming all the sessions, so and we could also give supervision on ground of that actually if we find any poor treatments.
So basically, a therapist effect.
What?
Basically, a therapist effect if you were having an analysis experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
But it's true, you have to rule that out, and that's difficult to rule out in a research project, and that's a bias.
Yeah. Okay. But it doesn't sound like there's an active mechanism in the protocol to do that.
No, but it's a good suggestion actually. You could that you have to be an experienced ACP practitioner and experienced inside of your field.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question that came in, has there been an effort to measure which elements of SIBAM have been used in the individual sessions as tied to outcomes? And parenthetically, by that I mean, rather than mandate that each element shows up in a session, take note of which organically come up.
That's an interesting question too.
Yeah,
You could actually ask, yeah, we could actually ask our backing group because they're sitting and watching the videos and confirming, and they're doing their scores by themselves and blinded from our scores just to make sure we are in the same pace around our scorings. So this is control of our scorings, and it could be interesting actually to track SIBAM elements and see how they interplay in the sessions. Yeah. Yeah, that's.
So it's not there yet, but boy, that could be
It's not
something
there, but it could be something
to talk about.
Yes.
Okay, great question. There's just a request, someone from Peru and asking, is the protocol, the material available in English, and if so, how can they access it?
Yeah, we're going to maybe put it on these Somatic Experiencing Institute's homepage, so for downloading, because it's public and it's for everybody's use.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and maybe I can throw in an FYI that we're working on a webpage for the research area, and that would be a great resource to have on that webpage. So,
yeah,
of course. Another question. I just lost it here. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Who is observing the sessions? And I think maybe you've touched on that, but so it sounds like they're videotaped, is that correct? And then there's a supervisor observing. Is that the totality of who is involved in the observing, or?
Now we have a little group actually working together and watching the videos together, and they're scoring the 9 building blocks, and the therapists scoring are, as mentioned, blinded for them, and then we can compare. And we tried actually to engage my sister. She's a medical doctor and knows absolutely nothing about somatic experiencing, just to see the fun of it. It's really observable, this. And we ended up, and you have to have some knowledge about somatic experiencing to actually be able to score it correctly. Otherwise, you will have to teach those people who are going to be the third party, who actually can guarantee that SE is used. So, yeah. So that's a little bias to that too, in a way, because it's not completely neutral in that way, because people are biased when they're using somatic experiencing. I mean, so.
There's another question here, but as a follow-on to what you're just saying, I had sort of had a question about the videoing and things. How do you handle client confidentiality, like IRB issues around those things? How is the client? after doing that.
Yes, Kraber can fill in on that because he has have a hard work with the data, the Danish data official governments to get this research project approved actually as secure data handling. And we also asked the scientific ethic committee here in Denmark in approval for this project, and they gave their approval. So it's in that way safe, but we were having some problems around sharing the video tape, the tape recordings, because we choose to do it physically and not by internet, because and that's the most secure way we could do it, to have it actually physically in one hard disk and then pass that on. Yeah, and yeah. And then we have an agreement. We have, of course, a written consent from the clients who are participating in the project, and we also have an arrangement with them that we are going to erase it afterwards, and it's not going to be used for any other purposes unless they give their written consent for that.
Okay. I'm going to circle back to the second question that someone had. I just wanted to build on the observation, but the question is, how do you differentiate different kinds of trauma in the background of back pain? Did you exclude people with certain kinds of trauma?
Yeah. They just called it pre-morbid PTSD, and everything goes into that, including trauma from car accidents, for example, causing these damages to the spine and causing the pain. They are equally to people who had submitted from childhood abuse or childhood trauma, and they were all included in a way in this project actually. So we're trying to differentiate in our project because multi-trauma, I mean, this takes another treatment approach. It's much longer. So we're trying to isolate our project to one trauma, which is almost impossible because people always have more than one trauma. So we've discussed that a lot. But it didn't make that difference in the spine in the research project done in that spine clinic. So no.
Interesting.
Yes.
So it's a hard, I mean, it just seems to be very hard to pull all that apart, you know, but maybe documenting some of that would help maybe control variables in effect, to identify at least different types of trauma or experiences that could act as background controls, like a demographic control.
Yeah, I'm going to pass that on. So Herr Elgaard, unfortunately, she couldn't be part of this today because she's in the Danish Research Committee as well. So she could have been present here and talk a little about this project herself, but she couldn't make it. So that would have been interesting, Christine, for her actually, and suggestion too.
Yeah, well, it sounds, and again, I've got another question here, but as another sidestep, when we have the conference in October, this would be just a great activity for people to get involved in, to talk about how do we, you know, build on this protocol or ways to enhance the protocol or enhance.
We could even make a new world cafe, real world cafe actually.
Oh,
that could be fun in different languages, and yeah, that could be fun. Yeah.
Oh gosh, you could get into all sorts of trouble in that one.
Yeah.
Here's another question. We're designing a group treatment protocol, and we're being cautious to not base our program on body sensation tracking. We found that people with complex trauma may not have access to body sensations. I'm wondering if other researchers are finding this and how they adapt, and if so, how they are adapting their protocol.
This is really good question. That's true, because if you are severely traumatized, the first victim of that is you grows numb and you can't feel yourself actually, and you just feel, yeah, you have to have a lot of work actually to make it safe to go into the body. This is why we're using resources and only into really severe traumas through the resource actually, and very titrated, because it can really trigger a massive activation. and overwhelming. So, and I know the mindfulness guys and the yoga guys, they're doing some research on this too, also trauma sensitive yoga, and they have the same caution actually to really work and take it into account. If you're very traumatized, you shouldn't do that much body work. You have to use it titrated. Yeah.
I'm double checking. I'm dropping down into I'm going to just read this. I've been integrating other people's research for 20 years into a model that proposes 8 categories of trauma that are risk factors for chronic conditions based on the literature. I wonder if something like this with questionnaires for each category could be helpful in the research to identify risk factors.
That could actually go into an assessment tool, actually. That could be nice to actually try and differentiate the clients in this. And this could be a research project in itself, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carry on. Do that.
Yes, please. Yes,
yes,
please.
please.
You'll hear from us about that. That's one of the questions I had. And please, I'm just asking a question because I don't think there are any other questions right now. But if someone's not had a question answered, please retype it in the Q&A and I'll make sure I look at it. But one of my questions was the measurement tools. If we're not using the same measurement tools, how can we, even if the protocol is used consistently, if we're not measuring, what have you all been doing around the measurement side of this?
I can see the most research projects, they always use measurement for PTSD and the severity of that. And we choose to use PCL5 because it adds up to the last DSM-5 in the States. So we are a little ahead of, we should be future-proofed in a way, at least until they come up with a 6th edition of that. So we accommodate to that. And that could be a good idea because in the future, you would be able actually to use the same measurement tool and to compare your studies.
Yeah.
So that's
consistent metrics. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Kriba? Because you've been into that a lot, actually, PCL5.
Yeah, I haven't been that much into it, but I was just looking at something else that would.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay. That's okay. I have like this of going into the sensations, and maybe for some people this is too much. That's actually also a part of our protocol to say that in case of dissociation, where deeper contact with bodily sensations and the inner felt sense can be too overwhelming, the therapist alternatively may ask what the client is experiencing from the state position she is in just now.
Back to the here now, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and also from what are they experiencing where they are now if they are not able to go into.
Oh yeah, from a dissociated place, yeah.
Yeah, we also have that in the manual, so it's I think it was like a commentary to some earlier thing you talked about. And
it's a magical manual. It's a magical manual. We covers it all, almost.
We tried. I mean, of course, we couldn't do everything, but we really turned every stone and like thought, what, and how can you see this? And what if the client this and this? And we really talked thoroughly through a lot. Yeah. But I'm sorry, you were talking about the PCL, and I haven't really used that a lot, but we found out to turn into that because, as you said, it is more future-based than the IESR, right?
Yes,
because there's been a lot of research on the IESR, but that will probably be left more behind, and then we found that it was better to use the PCL. Isn't that so?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And do you have something to add in regards to data protection? Because I know you had a really long fight with the data protection of authorities.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I have sort of left it in a way. So because it was quite a long process and going back and forth, and it was also like approving the using the XI, for example, the XI, which is where all the data is stored in a way from the clients. But since Switzerland is also an approved country and he has all the security, and he's working for clinics and hospitals, and both for qualitation assurance and also for research. So it was approved, that whole part. Yeah, but it took quite a lot of work.
Really a struggle, yeah.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
We've got a couple other questions that have come in as you have been. I mean, the amount of work it takes to actually make these things happen is just mind-boggling. We just, many of us that don't do a lot of research forget that it's not just setting up the study. There's a lot of background and, these permissions and IRBs and reviews. But also one question is, were these studies funded? And if so, what were the sources of funding? That's a whole nother range of issues to consider. So what was your experience with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that one?
We worked quite hard on that, and we did some applications, and we always got like, oh, it's so good what you're doing, but unfortunately, it goes to somebody else. But they were like really saying, continue because this looks very good. And then in the end, EASE and the Danish SE Association, they gave some funding, right? Maybe
Yes.
you have some additional. I'm sorry if I took it over, but Frank.
No, that's completely fine. Yes.
Yeah, because
because they choose to make a co-funding of the project actually. So I think we got 60,000 Danish crowns from the Danish association, and I think it was 30,000 from the EASE association, and that's in crowns, and you'll need to have a calculator to translate that into dollars. Yeah, but it is sufficiently for the moment until we ask Franz Fischer to do the calculating and all the statistics. Then it might not be sufficient, but we hope so.
Yeah, because in XI also there can be some of these statistics and and making it into graphs and stuff like that. He also has some possibility to do that in the XI program.
Yeah. Actually, we got an agreement with Scott Miller to be allowed to use his XI and put it into Franz Fischer's database. But it took a contract, and he was willing to actually fund the project by letting us use it for free, because he found it very interesting. We were going to use it as a measurement tool in the research project, and not using it as active in the therapeutic process, because this is what it's designed for. So he was very eager to learn more about that, but we lost the connection and he never signed the contract. So we choose to just go into his program and doing it all from his XI and then transport it into our own database.
Oh, you mean fit outcomes?
Fit outcome, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Fit outcome, yeah.
In his fit outcomes. And then the other things you do in XI, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
And we will also have access to his database because he's accumulating all the psychologists, all the therapists who are using his program. Actually, they are all summed up in one database and calculating the effect size. So we hope to get a little higher than that in our project and just prove that this is effective. So that's nice to have access to that.
And the more we do, the more we become eligible for funding and foundation grants and other resources. I mean, it's just really starting to build the base to make that happen and create the momentum. So we're hopeful that people will take this protocol and start applying it so we can start building that base. I think there's only one more question, and then I'm going to open it up one more time, but are there any international comparisons being undertaken with this protocol?
Yeah, that goes into the idea of having a real world cafe during the conference, actually. Yes, because it could be biased, culturally biased, actually. And that would be really, really nice to be able to compare and to make up for that.
Mhm.
Mm.
I'm just thinking Southeast Asia applications versus US versus,
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Normally you standardize these things in different languages, and now we have only done it for English-speaking areas in a way, and Denmark, basically Denmark, actually.
Mhm, mhm.
Mm.
So just at the starting point, but it's webinars like these that we hope to start generating interests and activity around research. I'm just looking, there is upstairs one more. Have they found statistical measures to ensure that the evidence did not occur by chance? What methods were particularly helpful? So that's, did you, analysis of variance was mentioned a few times, hypothesis testing, what kinds of things did you do to handle that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we are working without a control group. Actually, normally you would have that as an insurance of making up for a placebo effect. And yeah,
Mhm, mhm,
no, it doesn't go into our project. It's more like a pilot project, actually,
mhm,
just to try and see if our design that actually is helpful in the research of somatic experiencing, because we add this process measuring tools to it.
We
Yeah.
talked about having a waiting list control group.
Yeah,
as
that's
well,
true. That's
right?
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be added, but it's the only way I know that you can make up for that.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, and I guess some confidence interval calculations and things like that can be always applied. There's stat testing that can be applied even without a control group, but it's, you have to have it set up to be able to do that.
Mm.
So, okay, well, I
Yeah.
think, the question, the person who asked
Yeah.
the question was, you can do within group
I have
analysis.
something to add to the last question, because it's just to remind me of Scott Miller actually accumulating all these psychologists and psychotherapists using his fit outcome, that there is actually a effect size there that proves if you use just fit outcome, then your effect size will improve a bit in a way, and we measure ourselves up against that in a way. So and that way you could say we have a control group, not exactly a control group, but we have something more concrete to measure our findings up against.
Mhm,
I don't know if that exactly answers that question, but
mhm, mhm.
mhm,
Yeah, there's just so many directions to take with this. Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, I'm just double checking. I think we are running, oops, yeah, one more. Boy, I think we're good. I'm looking at the time and realizing that in Denmark, it is getting later and
Yes,
later
yes, it's
on
true.
a Friday. And
Yes.
I want to give a big thank you to both of you for joining us and sharing this fascinating, absolutely important material, and what a resource for us to be able to talk about and leverage and use in our own research, no matter where we are. And very inspiring, very energizing, because it's like people, I think, have a sense that we should be doing this, but how do we do it? And it's
Mhm,
great to know that
mhm,
this is available. So thank both of you so much for first doing the hard work and sharing it with us. And I think the idea of a World Cafe at the conference, those of you that haven't signed up or can make the conference, please, let's have a great conversation. I think that would be a delightful way to do it.
yeah.
So,
Yes.
any final thoughts from you, both of you, before we shut down?
No, it's such a good opportunity to share. Actually, we did that once times before, but this is really it's been delightful actually to share, because I mean we share it on our own little small groups, but this is actually getting up in a much broader perspective and getting much more contacts actually, and get some reflections on that. So this has been very inspiring.
We
Yeah,
all
to be
learned
invited for this. Yeah, that's thank you for that. It's always nice to share. I mean, Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
anything, Kripa?
Yeah, I'd like to say also thank you for being invited, and thank you also to all the participants. We don't see, but we hear some questions. But thank you for participating. And then I would also like to share that being part of a project like this, of creating a manual and doing this work, I think that it was a very big learning process also, and a way of coming deeper into SE. Like looking so thoroughly at each of the points and being more aware of what is it actually that I'm doing, also while I'm doing it. So I think it was so interesting and nice to do this work with Ulrik and Frank, to have all this sharing about all these things. So the process itself, I can only recommend it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I do want to just close out with a couple more quick things, because people have been asking about the conference and things like that. The conference is October 22nd through 24th. Unfortunately, calls for abstracts are closed. That went out earlier this year. But we would certainly encourage you to continue to talk to us and share your research. We are going to be starting some Zoom sessions soon, to let people just talk about their research, have more conversation around what they're doing and why they're doing and what help they need, what work they would like to get support on, some information sharing. So please email research@traumahealing.org, and just let us know that you're interested. Let us know what you'd like to be involved in, and we will get you involved. And just be careful what you ask for. But I think this is exciting, and I think building a community of researchers and people actively engaged in research is where we're heading with all this. So thank you for being part of that community. And again, thank you, Kripa and Frank, for spending your Friday evening with us. And we will probably close out now, but there will be a recording and transcripts sent of this to all registrants, probably with 7 to 10 business days is usually what it takes. So please be on the lookout for that. So I think we are set. And again, thank you all so much for joining us, and please have a good weekend, safe weekend, and take good care.